Well, I don't know what generation you're dialing in, meaning you're in the 20s or 30s, I don't know. But this book is something I strongly recommend reading. I would say start with accepting the fact that it is a game. Interviewing is a game. It's a funny way of thinking because if you know the rules of the game, you play it well.
In terms of like the most challenging part, so if we can break down the notion of not the sprint and marathon.
It is simple based on where you're coming from. What's the demand and supply? That's it. What is the demand for the role you're interviewing and what's the supply? In this episode, I wanted to bring something that is very close to my heart because I went through the process myself in 2020 and 21. I interviewed at maybe 20 different companies in about 12 months. Some for experimenting, some at startups, and also at big companies like LinkedIn, Google, Meta. It was called Facebook back then when I interviewed. Netflix, Salesforce, many other companies. These are the top 6 I mentioned, the big ones. But there are many startups and late startups as well. I learned a lot of experience through interviewing because I had not interviewed for 20 years. Imagine 20 years in one organization. I never had to interview at all. When I came to the world of interviewing, I said, wow, things have changed altogether. Even though I had 20 years experience, now I had to go through all the hoops of coding, showing my coding skills, systems design, and behavioral interviews. That really tripped me off. But I very quickly learned that interview is a skill. And this 3P framework, which is prepare, plan, and perform, is an outcome of my own process. In the last 18 months, ever since I started Change with Coaching, I have coached about 27 people to interview and land a job. Engineers, data engineers, up to staff engineer level, engineering managers, product managers, and TPMs. So this is something that I used for my own interviews in 2020 and 21 to finally land a job at Meta as a senior manager. I also cleared the interview at Google with the same framework. I helped many clients, 27 paid clients in the last 18 months to use this framework to land a job. So what we're talking today in this episode is not a mere theory of something I read in a book or some articles on the internet. It's practical experience of me and 27 other people who took this framework and applied with intention to land a job.
That's great. I'm still in the process of sharing it on our Instagram page, and thank you for the great introduction. I will start basically the main part, but this was a great introduction. I also have basically similar problem or challenges in the past that I want to also relate to the stories that you're going to share about your own experience, first-hand experience, and also helping others in this challenging issue, being like in this competitive environment, being top, let's say 1%, like there are 100 people applying for the job, being top 1% would be very challenging. So please feel free to share also like as an introduction for the next 5-10 minutes.
I would say start with accepting the fact that it is a game. Interviewing is a game. It's a funny way of thinking because if you know the rules of the game, you play it well and you enjoy playing the game. That's where fun begins. I started interviewing. I realized it is so difficult. Initially, I was dreading these interviews, whether it is coding interview or systems design. Instead of blaming the process or the tech interviews are broken, companies are not doing the right things, especially if you go to the blind app and start reading, you will go crazy about all the negative things going around. My philosophy is very simple. Do what is in your control. Do you want a job? If the answer is yes, know the rules of the game. Each company has their own rules. Rather than fighting the rules, saying it's all bad, rubbish, and so on, you either decide to play the game or don't play the game with that company. If you decide to play the game of interview with a company, you then need to know the rules of each company. How do they structure their loop? What do they look for each level? How are they leveled? Understand all the rules of the game here. We will cover more how to understand the rules in the 3P framework as we go on. But knowing the rules of the game will really help you to play the game well. And not only play the game well, but enjoy the process. If you dread the process, if you don't like it, every day you wake up and say, oh my God, it is stressful. Tomorrow I have another meeting, another interview, and so on. You may not enjoy the process. You have to start enjoying the process from the beginning. You have a reason to interview. You're playing a game, and play it well. We will cover all the details in the next 3 framework points: prepare, plan, and perform. But that was my introduction, Masud, to tell people that this is a game. You have to enjoy playing the game.
One last is that I also shared on Instagram. I want as a story. I want to share as live on Instagram because that's also a great channel for engaging with our audience who are passionate about learning these things.
So let me do this way while Masud comes. One of the books I read, this is the book I read in 2003. I'm talking about 21 years ago. Some of you may have, I don't know what generation you're dialing in, meaning you're in your 20s or 30s, I don't know. But this book is something I strongly recommend reading. Not the whole book, it may be too difficult for you to read. It's about 300 pages. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a brilliant book. It was written in the year 1937. We're talking about 87 years ago. It's a brilliant book. There are about 13 principles to achieve what you want in your life. Amazing nuggets of wisdom, where he's researching so many successful people around the world and talk about what are they doing differently, how are they achieving their desires and goals. Specifically, there is a chapter number 6 called Organized Planning. Although the book is wonderful, I want you to think at one chapter, which is chapter number 6 called Organized Planning. What is interesting is Napoleon Hill in the year 1937 is talking about how to look for a job. Remember, this was written during the Great Depression in the US, 1937. So Hill is talking about how to find a good job, how to create your resume, how to create a letter. There are so many brilliant nuggets here. One of the things I want to highlight here is that he has a 7-step process, and the title of the section is How to Get the Exact Position You Desire. It is very inspiring, especially if you have not thought about this concept. Hill is talking about how you can plan a role for yourself. For some of you, this may be a stretching. Come on, let me get a job first and then think about creating a job. That's fine. But there are some steps from step 3 to 7. For example, study your company. Choose the company you want to work and why. In fact, even choose the manager as well. If you really like somebody creating great content on LinkedIn, you can always approach them and say, hey, I like the way you are approaching, the way you are leading people. Do you have any positions to interview for? So pick the company, pick the manager to interview for. I like the wisdom and the nugget from the year 1937. Then study your prospective employer, their policies, personal organization rules and culture and principles, and chances for growth. That's amazing gem as well. Most people I work with, they don't know where they want to interview and why they want to interview there. They are going by other people's standards. Okay, my friend is in FANG and big tech. I want to be in big tech. But why? What's your reasoning for that? Is there a specific reason to choose that company? I love the 4th bullet point, which is he comes back to this question: what can you offer to the company? What can you offer to the company? This is a brilliant question to think. Based on your experience, knowledge, and skill, whatever you have gathered in your career, what can you offer to the company? That is such a mental shift. Now you're no longer looking for, give me any job. You're thinking, okay, based on my background, what can I offer to this company? How can they serve them? How can I help them achieve their goals? This shifts the perspective from you to the company, because now you're looking at how do I add value to the company, not how the company can add value to me. It's a brilliant way to shift your mentality. Yeah. So I like his wisdom. So forget about a job. Concentrate on what you can give. This shift is not easy for some people. I'm not denying it. Because we work in the industry for a long time, or you might be in the academics for a long time. So this idea of I can add value, I am valuable to employers is not easy. But once you get this mindset of I am valuable, my knowledge, my skills, and my experience, and the leadership wisdom, if you have years of experience, it is valuable to the employer. Once you make that mind shift, you have no limitations on getting jobs because you can easily interview. You know the process. You know how to select the employer, the hiring manager. You know your priorities. You know the skills you have, and you can just go through the loop of interview to perform and land a job. So one more plug to the book. If you have not read the book, read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, written in the year 1937. Chapter number 6, Organized Planning. 1937, 87 years ago, this book was written. This is sold, I think, 25 million copies so far. 25 million copies.
25 million copies. That's great. So Think and Grow Rich. I think I have basically seen it as a short format, as I usually do for the books. Yeah. So for the audio version. But yeah, thank you so much for the recommendation. Now we can start. Please give me once again the title of this episode that we are recording live. And we are going to also have the edited version soon in 3 basically chapters. Please give me the title and we can start our main recording after that.
Today's title is the 3P framework for acing your job interviews. That is my definition of today's topic is we will discuss a framework, the 3P framework for acing your job interviews.
So can you give me the title of these 3 Ps? And then we will go to each of the chapters together.
Yeah, the 3 Ps stand for prepare, which is number 1. Number 2 is plan. Number 3 is perform. Prepare, plan, and perform. 3P.
Prepare, plan, and perform. Looks very simple. In one line, if you want to summarize all the wisdom that we're going to discuss, probably each chapter in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, in one sentence, what is the gist or the core of each of these keywords? Prepare, plan, and perform.
You can think of this way. The outcome of prepare is your profile on LinkedIn and resume and a list of companies where you want to apply for. That is the outcome of prepare. Plan is you have a list of interviews scheduled. That is the outcome of plan. The end of plan phase is you will have a list of companies with dates, whether they're informational interviews or actual interview groups. That is the outcome of plan. The outcome of perform step is you have a job offer in your hand or offer stage discussion with the recruiter or the hiring manager. That is the outcome of perform. So each of these steps have a clear outcome. You will end up with this outcome after each of these steps.
Awesome. Let's dive into the first chapter, which is prepare. Please give me some basically introduction. I will have my questions.
Yes. One big thing I've realized, Masood, I told earlier, I coached about 27 people in the last 18 months. This theme comes back all the time in my interview coaching. Either they were impacted by a layoff or they're looking for a new opportunity outside. This theme comes, they think it is a sprint. So the first thing I drill into their head when they come to me for coaching is, look, job interviews, specifically tech interviews these days, it's a marathon, not a sprint. What it means is, depending on your case, whether somebody is impacted by a layoff or simply looking for a shift in their career or adjacent opportunities or some other stream they want to jump, depending on their goal, it could take from 90 days to 180 days, which means 3 months to 6 months. In 80% of the case, it can be 3 months, but it could be more because of the current job market and the economy. When people hear that, they get discouraged. Oh, I have to wait for 4 months or 5 months. This is the number one thing I want people to learn in tech interviews. depending on where you're coming from, it could be a marathon. It is not a sprint. Prepare mentally for that. Otherwise, you are in for a disaster, because after 3 weeks, you will realize a couple of rejections or one or two recruiters not responding to you, or they talk to you, but they ghost you after 2 interviews. You start feeling bad about yourself, that something is wrong with me. I am not good enough, so they are coming back to me. You start narrating these stories in your minds, which will not allow you to move forward with persistence and passion. So if you were to remember one thing in the beginning phase itself is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I remember in one of the coaching sessions I did with somebody who interviewed at Airbnb, this person had 7 rounds of interviews. So recruiter round, hiring manager round, and then the loop was 7 rounds, each 30 minutes. So that's an example of a marathon. It could be maybe 3-4 days just to finish 7 interviews. In one of the interviews, I remember she had to present a project in a presentation. So here is my presentation. Here is what I did in my previous company, which is in alignment with what you're looking for in this role. As I said earlier, depending on your goal and the role you're looking for, be prepared for a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Awesome. In terms of like the most challenging part, so if we can break down the notion of not a sprint and marathon. Mm-hmm. So have you seen this challenge mostly for like first time job seekers, or those that are impacted, for example, by wave of layoffs, or anybody is the same?
I think it is the same, depending on where they're coming from. I have one example of a new grad who had this challenge. The same example is with a financial analyst who was a part of a layoff. He had to go through about 4 or 5 months of interviewing. After 5 months, he found a job. So this is common, not only in the tech world. I gave you the example of a financial analyst as well. This is across the board, depending on the situation, not specific to career path or technology or non-tech background. It is simple based on where you're coming from. What's the demand and supply? That's it. What is the demand for the role you're interviewing, and what's the supply? And that determines what's your chance of getting an interview and clearing that interview.
All right. And in terms of like the you mentioned for the prepare part, the coaching examples, the 27 recent examples in the past 18 months you mentioned. So can you tell more about if you can categorize them into, like, for example, engineers or managers or any other fields, and what are the common patterns and what are the differences? Like, what are the customizations for the prepare stage?
I'll tell you what is common before I go to what is different. The common thing is they have to maintain motivation. Regardless of their stream or in the function, keeping the motivation for a long time is really critical. I have something called as motivation equation. This is something we go through the first session itself and say, understand that this is a long game, this is a marathon, and we go through an equation. This equation has a numerator and a denominator. The numerator is expectancy multiplied by value. Expectancy is that your belief that you can achieve this goal. For example, your belief that you can actually crack a FANG interview is a belief. That's the expectancy. Multiplied by value. What's the value of clearing the interview? If you achieve this goal of a role at Google or Meta, what's the upside? What's the value of this job? That's the numerator. The denominator is impulsivity multiplied by delay. Impulsivity is all these distractions. Some people are not able to concentrate. They might reach their phone every 20 minutes, look at the phone. They may do something else. They have so many shiny objects around. So that's all impulsivity. Multiplied by delay in the denominator is delay, meaning there is no clear goal. Meaning, do you have a goal for 2 weeks to finish your resume, 1 week to finish your LinkedIn profile? Are you approaching 3 people this week for networking and mentorship? Those are all specific goals, short-term goals you can achieve to create a domino effect on your interview. So this delay is really important. So numerator, expectancy times value. The denominator is impulsivity times delay. As you can imagine, most of the folks are math folks here. The numerator has to be higher than the denominator. So the first goal I tell with my clients is, can we increase the numerator, which is your belief that you can crack this, and understand the value of this job. How can you quantify the value of this job? So we increase the numerator as soon as possible. As we go further in our relationship in coaching, we decrease the impulsivity and delay as well. Impulsivity is something they have to be accountable. I will finish these things today and I will not be distracted. And delay is primarily we set weekly goals. By the end of this Friday, we will achieve these things. By the end of next Friday, we will achieve these things. So this is a common pattern for all sort of roles. Now, what is different, Masood, is the kinds of interview loops they go through. I have helped software engineers up to E5 at Meta at this point, and data engineers, both IC4, IC5 at Meta, and in other companies as well, like Airbnb I mentioned earlier, many other companies. So engineering managers, product managers, and TPMs. I have helped 5 different categories of people. Depending on what they're interviewing for, the loop is different. The initial loops are always same. You talk to the recruiter first. It is more of a screening round. And then they ask the hiring manager to talk to them and say, is it a good fit? Then if those two are clear, then there is a loop, which is a structured interview loop. There could be 4 to 5 to 7, depending on the company. As I said, one example of 7 interviews. But depending on the experience and the role, there could be 7 interviews. 4, 5, or up to 7. And that loop is different. Depending on the background, depending on the role or the function, they could bring things like product sense, behavioral interviews, systems design interview, data warehouse design interview, coding interviews. For engineering managers, code review interview. That's something unique these days. They give you a piece of code as a manager to review, critique, and comment on the code. So these are the kinds of things. And sometimes for PMs, it's case study interviews. Here is a case study, create a slide deck for this. If you are a TPM and interviewing for a TPM role, you could be asked, here is a project which is stuck here. What would you do to move forward in this project? Tell us the proposal in a slide deck. If you are an analytics person, I have seen my clients getting this case study and say, here is the current case study of a company, a fictitious company XYZ. How would you put a plan for analytics, data analytics?